This is video 7 on mathematical operators. The essential question we're covering today, which you should be writing in your notes, is what do the common mathematical operators mean and how are their values useful? Mathematical operators are little symbol shortcuts that tell you to perform a specific math operation on a number or a variable. You are actually familiar with lots of these. You've been using them in your math classes and your science classes for a long time. So, for example, a plus sign adds two variables, a minus sign subtracts. Square root takes the square root, and a less than or equal to sign compares two values. Now we're going to talk about some new operators that you may or may not have seen before. The first of these are called subscripts. Subscripts are used to clarify or identify a variable that might get mixed up with other variables that you're working with. These are commonly used in science. Initial and final subscripts are some of the ones we use the most. For example, we might say that something starts at 2 miles away and stops at 5 miles away. Both of these are distances, so it's important to be able to clarify which one is the initial distance or starting distance and which one is the final or ending distance. So we use a little I to designate initial and a little tiny f to designate final. If we have another variable like velocity down below and we want to show that it's the velocity of a specific object like a dog, we might write v dog, so we know exactly whose velocity we're talking about. Later in the year we're going to be talking about different kinds of forces. So if we're using the variable f for force and we're specifically talking about gravity, we would say f gravity. Another operator that might be new to you is the symbol delta. If you see a delta in front of a variable, it means the amount that that variable has changed from an initial to a final value. So, for example, if a car starts at a velocity of 40 meters per second and speeds up to a velocity of 46 meters per second, its delta v, or its change in velocity, is 6 meters per second. It's basically the difference between the two values. It's important to note that delta can be zero. The change can be zero if the variable's value isn't changing. It can also be negative if a variable's value becomes more negative. So it doesn't always have to be a positive value. Another new operator is AVG. If you see a subscript that says AVG on a variable, it means to take the average value of a variable that may be changing. So you can add the initial and final values and divide by 2 in order to get the average. For example, if a car starts at 40 meters per second velocity and speeds up to a velocity of 46 meters per second, the average is going to be right in the middle. The average velocity will be 43 meters per second. The last new operator that we're covering today is the symbol sigma. If you see the sigma symbol before a variable, it means to take the sum or total of all the values of that variable. So, for example, you have 4 friends and they each have $10. Sigma money for those friends, so the total money that those friends have collectively, would be $40. So let's revisit the essential question that we started with at the beginning of the video. What do the common mathematical operators mean and how are their values useful? What we want you to do now is to write a short summary at the bottom of your notes. Make sure to cover subscripts, the delta symbol, average subscript, and the sigma symbol.